right. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I had breakfast this morning with a few of you from Colorado. Where are you? We were talking a little bit about the national parks. Definitely one of my favorite things to do. Great way to see the country, that's for sure. So thanks for having me this morning. Thanks for having me actually here over the next few days as I'm presenting on a few different topics. What a great event this is, and really excited to be a part. As Joel mentioned, I work with the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. I'm a professor there, and I oversee our master's and certificate in leadership programs. A few different things we offer at the Townsend Institute. And so I'm here to talk with you all today about culture, specifically curating a worship team culture wherever you are and what that looks like. Now, let me tell you, we could have a full 7-day, 14-day, you name it conference just on culture. There's a lot to unpack there. But I'm going to try my best here in the time that we have to then hopefully leave you all with a few take-home tips of things you might be able to do to improve or enhance the cultures at your churches, your congregations, your schools, life teams, whatever it is where you serve. So to begin, kind of going back to this little piece about Rocky Mountain National Park, I've had a chance to visit Colorado a number of times over the years. And one of the times I did so, I spoke at a women's conference there. There's a church called South Mountain Community Church, for anyone that might be familiar. It's a non-denominational Christian church. It's actually the largest Christian church in the entire state of Utah. It's Utah, right? So entire state of Utah. 5 sites, and they really do some exceptional works around a very unique and vulnerable population there in Utah. So they had me out to speak at their conference, and really Concordia and this church has created quite a partnership. So much so that this church sends several of their pastors and staff through our leadership programs every year. They have a special scholarship with us, and so we welcome several of them in every year. So it's been great getting to know them and a little bit more about what they do. And so one of the members there, he's actually on the elder board, he said to me, not only are we sending some of our pastors to the Townsend Institute this year, but my son is also going to come through the program. And I'm thinking, this is awesome. Okay, great. Tell me a little bit about him. And so he tells me a little bit about Ricky, and about 6 months go by, and Ricky ends up in my class. A class that we have actually on culture at the Townsend Institute. It's our Org Leadership 602 class where we talk all about what it means to build and maintain a healthy culture. So I'm excited to have Ricky in there. Hadn't met him yet, gotten to know his parents really well. I know his church, where he's from. And so we're there our first night of class, and our students are going around and they're choosing an organization that they're going to study for the entire term. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on what this is. Because it's a class on culture, they need to choose an organization that they think, that they've heard about, read about, that they think has like a healthy or unique organizational culture. And they're going to spend the next 7 weeks really digging into how they do it, right? What does that mean? How do they do it, and what can we learn? So, kind of shout it out. What are some companies, some organizations, businesses that you have heard of or been a part of that you think has kind of a unique or healthy culture? New Belgium Brewery. Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. You're going to have to come and come take our class and introduce them. Okay, so brewery. What else? Netflix. Yes, very good. Any others that you can think of that you hear read on the media, read about in newspapers, interesting business models? The Miami Heat. All right. Let me give you a couple examples of some that came. So Google, every semester seems to be one that students like to study. You know, they have nap pods there and like slides and scooters and things like that. Southwest Airlines. Right, you study that one. Their social media department, right, is very unique, very interesting, been in the news a lot. In-N-Out Burger, California, right? So In-N-Out Burger is one that sometimes they study. Chick-fil-A, hard to study In-N-Out Burger and not want to study Chick-fil-A at the same time. All right, these all ringing a bell. LinkedIn is in there about how their recruiting and hiring processes are pretty unique. All right, the Lego company. Oh, look into that one. get paid to play with Legos all day long, pretty much. All right, here's a couple more. Disney. Disney's a pretty popular one. Any Disney fans? They'll study the Disney company. Trader Joe's, right? That's a very interesting one. When you go in, very interesting dynamic sometimes you see amongst employees and leaders. So these are just a few of some of the most common ones that I see in these projects. Students are always choosing different ones. So we go through, and these are some of them. And then I get to Ricky that first night in class. I said, okay, Ricky, what are you going to study? And Ricky says, I want to study golden hippo. That's the emblem from golden hippo, right? And just like all of you are looking stunned and speechless, the rest of the class was too, as was I, saying, how do we go from Google and Chick-fil-A and Disney to golden hippo? I said, well, Ricky, what is golden hippo? And he says, I don't know. I just thought the name was cool. So here's a story about how over 7 weeks, Ricky studied golden hippo and the culture surrounding it. So it was a pretty fun class, and I'll get back to a little bit of that in the end. But it's an awesome project, and golden hippo, I'll share with you all a little bit more about it, what it actually does. So, all right. So as we start to talk about culture, I want to begin by giving you kind of a working definition of what culture means. We're coming from this as more of a leadership, organizational side of culture. Again, this is a huge word. So much can be packed into the idea of culture. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to use Sheen's definition. When we talk about team, group, business, organizational culture, it's a learned pattern of beliefs, values, assumptions, and behavioral norms. Right? I think the beliefs and values piece are pretty self-explanatory. Notice there that first key phrase, though, is the learned pattern. This is, again, where that piece of organizational culture does mirror when we talk about personal culture or family culture, how you were brought up. And those same values, those same cultures that you get then often stay with you into adulthood and any sort of group or organization you go into. That belief structure. Who you believe in, what you believe in, the values that undergird your belief system as well, impact, and should impact, right, every piece of our life and everything that we do. The assumptions piece, right, what that really means is where do we get our authority from, right, or how do we assume things should be done or need to be done? In Christian worlds, of course, our one and only truth is the Bible, right? From an organizational standpoint, perhaps it's the assumption that things need to be done according to a particular process or procedure or policy, or maybe the assumption that, you need to follow what the teacher says or what your parents say or what community leaders say, right? Kind of that process and how we live out our beliefs and our values. And then there's the behavioral norms piece. And this is one of my favorite things to study as well. The norms that take place in an organization can be everything from how people interact with one another, how they dress, how they talk, right? How the office is set up, right? Or cubicles or whatever that layout kind of looks like, right? Those behavioral norms that then impact all that we do. So in the class, we study a little bit here about what is culture, and then I'm going to get into then how you then take that and help assess the culture that you might have in your own team, right? So first things first, though, why do we talk about culture, and why is this important? What's maybe one of the reasons why they asked me to come speak here a little bit? Well, for one, this is, I know it's hard to read, so let me read it to you. Here is Sheen, Edgar Sheen. He's considered kind of the guru on organizational culture, and he said, the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. If you do not manage culture, it manages you. And you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening. All right, I love that piece. If you do not manage culture, it manages you. kind of truthful, right? If you don't have a pulse on kind of what's going on your teams, your congregations, your organizations, sometimes it can get overrun with values, beliefs, assumptions, norms that maybe you don't even want, right? And then that can be a hard hole to dig out of. So why do we talk about it? Mainly, culture is always evolving. Just when you think you've figured it out, something's going to change, right? Culture changes because of changes in leadership. We see this at our church level. We see it at our local city community levels, our state levels, right? National levels, international levels. When there's a change in leadership, there's oftentimes going to be a change in the culture. Sometimes it's quick and sometimes it's slow. It just depends on the extent. Right? So changes in leadership. Social shifts that take place, that's a big one. We study a lot about generational differences. That's a very fascinating piece, and I know something that a lot of you in this room wrestle with, right, on a daily basis, is how do you appease different age groups, different demographics on your teams and in your congregations, right? This is the first time in history where we're seeing 5 generations kind of collaborating on teams or in workplaces. It's uncommon. It's challenges that people did not have decades and decades ago. Right? Do you know the average lifespan today? I looked it up just to make sure I had a current 2023 statistic for you. What is it? Shout it out. 79, actually, very close. So 79.11, in case you were wondering. So 79.11 is average lifespan. 100 years ago, though? What was it 100 years ago? 1923. 57. 57. That's a span of 22 years. That's a generation, right? So full generational difference. That's not just impacting our organizations, but our family lives as well. Multi-generational households are on the rise, right? So more often we're seeing not just 2, but 3 to even 4 generations living together. Again, I'm from California. That's actually not quite uncommon. It's incredibly expensive to live in California, so it's not uncommon to have the grandparents, the parents, and the children all living in the same household, and how that impacts the culture of the home, but also those learned values, beliefs, assumptions, and norms that those people are then taking into churches and communities and workplaces. There's also something the research is calling the sandwich generation, kind of a social shift. Those of you in this room might be experiencing that. Maybe if you're in your 50s, give or take, you're considered the sandwich generation. Perhaps you are still raising children that are under your roof, but you're also starting to care for aging parents. So you've got caretaking on both sides. What a blessing to be able to care for parents and care for kids, but also how tiring that can be and how draining that can be, right? And the cultural shifts that come with that. So social shifts and all types of things. Gen Z, our youngest generation right now, is considered the activist generation. They're very globally conscious about things. So obviously technology has impacted a huge piece of that. But all of these changes, again, impact then the cultures that we're creating. Social shifts. Again, we could go for hours about that for sure. Technology, pretty self-explanatory there. What else influences culture? It's always evolving because of competition, right? Even in church, right? You're competing from time to time or other with churches maybe in your own communities, or because of the technology, those that are streaming church from elsewhere. A couple others talked about generations. Finances is another piece. I think Matthew talked about this yesterday a little bit, how many of us give online, right, versus in the offering plates. Some of the changes and kind of the cultural shift just of our church services. Right, that's been much different. I remember my grandma used to always give me a $1 bill, and then I could put it in the offering tray when I was growing up and go around. And now I have to scrounge in my purse to try to find the $1 bill to give my kids to be able to do that, because I want them to have the same experience. But then it comes around, and now I can Venmo if I really wanted to, right? So different, right? That total change in the culture shift. And then finally, local and global events. heavily, heavily impact our culture. All right, so we have a working definition for culture. Here's why we talk about it. It's always evolving. As I mentioned, just when you think you figured it out, one or more of these things is probably going to change and throw a whole nother wrench in it. So how do we study it? And we're going to do a little activity here in a second, all right? So Sheen gives us 3 things to kind of look at. The first is to look at the artifacts of your culture. The actual visible environment of maybe your church or your team or your rehearsal room. You can apply this not only to your worship team, to your organizations, but you can also apply this to your personal lives as well, right? How homes are set up, what that looks like, a layout, maybe any nonprofits that you're a part of, charity work that you do, the actual artifacts. So your visible environment, it can be the architecture, the technology that's used. There's a whole bunch of research out there on things like color, right? The psychology and science behind colors. Does anybody here know there are 2 specific colors that are said to elicit hunger in people? Red and yellow. Yeah, so it's not crazy that a lot of fast food restaurants are red and yellow. McDonald's and Burger King and Carl's Jr., right? All of these are red and yellow. A lot of doctors' offices, therapy offices oftentimes go with the serene blues and greens, right? It's not because they're copycatting each other. There's a lot of science and psychology behind what that does to your mind, right? How that puts you in a particular position. Those of you that have children or are going to have children, there's certain colors that you may want to paint a nursery and not paint a nursery. Certain ones are said to make babies cry more than others, so you might want to research that. So, all kinds of stuff. But those are the artifacts, right? And when they add up, they really can make a difference. How things are set up. We talk about proximity. Again, offices, how things are set up. Are there cubicles? A lot of those organizations I put up in the beginning screen have gone away from that, and it's like big open spaces now so that there aren't physical barriers between people. Right? How bosses or leaders in organizations might change their desk so it's not come in and sit down with this barrier in front of us. Let's be together. Small tweaks really can make a difference. So that's the artifacts piece. As I mentioned, the values. So the students, many of them actually went into these organizations. They called, they emailed, they got interviews. Many of them chatted with the little bots on some of those organizations to find out. And they would ask questions about values. In short, why do you do what you do? And it's very quick to know. And I'm going to ask you all this question so you can start to think about it in a second, especially as the next screen comes up. But do you know why you do what you do? Does your team know why you do what you do? Is there a shared answer for that? Does it differ? Because those values will undergird, obviously, the work that is done. And then again, the assumptions. The assumptions. So the rules, the policies, the procedures, those types of things that kind of govern how the things are done. So that's just one way to study culture. There are a multitude, but this is Sheen's recommendation. So I want you all to take a second. And I would like you to kind of assess and then discuss with someone sitting around you the artifacts, values, and assumptions of your team. Think about just a normal day with your team. Try to picture it. You can close your eyes if you want to. What does your space look like? How are things set up? How are people dressed? How do they interact and talk with one another? What do you talk about? Right? What does the start of that look like? What does the end of that look like? Right? You can jot down some notes a little bit, but you're going to do your own little mini assessment. You're not students in my class. You don't have 7 weeks, but I'll give you a few minutes. All right? So jot down a few things and then feel free to share them with one another. All right. Well, there you go. Your own little mini assessment. All right. Hopefully it sparks some good discussion. What I love about this, and some of you know that I've had conversations with, so my background is in communication, and one of the things I've studied for a number of years is nonverbal communication, taken classes just in that. The professors did talk, actually. But one of the neat things is there's so much you can study just nonverbally, right? Just by a show of hand, well, y'all would raise your hand. How many of you enjoy people watching, right? That is nonverbal communication at its best, right? The same thing can be done when we talk about kind of assessing culture. There is so much you can pick up on just nonverbally, right? It's really fascinating. John Townsend, again, the obviously founder of our Townsend Institute, is an organizational consultant. And when he would go into just, Fortune 500 companies and stuff, one of the first things he would do before we'd ever sit down and meet with anyone, meet with any leaders, is he'd just kind of walk the organization. Just walk. Just kind of walk through the buildings, walk through the doors, just kind of see what's going on. And again, you can pick up on so much of a culture. And you can kind of get a sense for, is this a healthy culture? Is it unhealthy? Is it open? Is it rigid? Is it this? Is it that? Just by kind of looking at things like the artifacts. How is it set up? How is it decorated, right? How are people sitting? How are they interacting with one another? What does that look like, right? A little harder to do this day and age with some of the technology pieces. Zoom, you can only do so much. But even being on fly on the wall in a Zoom meeting, you can kind of watch and listen into the interactions of other people, right? The backgrounds that people have, whether it's a virtual background or an office background or home background, right? All of that can contribute to the sense of culture, right? So when you think about your results, my question for you is, does your culture analysis, does it produce the results you want? Right? If you were sharing with someone next to you or writing it down on your notepad, is it something that makes you proud and smile? Or is it something where you're like, oh, maybe I would change that up a little bit if I could, right? I wish our rehearsal space looked like this. I wish people came through the doors with this kind of interaction or this kind of conversation, right? I wish we weren't having conflict about this. That was our session yesterday. In addition to that, again, would others on the team have the same results as you? Because culture is a very subjective thing, right? So you might think everything is A+, set up 100% how you want it, but does everyone else on the team have the same feeling? Right? Keep in mind that culture is curated both for the people that we're with and around, but also by the people. Think about that for a minute. There are things that you can do as a leader to set up for a healthy culture or the culture that you want. Right? You can arrange the chairs in a certain way. Just something as simple as how chairs are arranged can very much influence the communication or interaction that happens in a room. Okay? Or what room or what space you choose to use. Okay? I know I had classes in college which were great. Went to school in California, so it was a little easier to do, where the professor would say, get up, out of your seats, let's go, we're going out to the grass. Let's go have class out on the grass today or on a patio, right? Just getting outside, sitting on grass versus in rigid rows in this ugly classroom with only white walls, right? Totally changed up the interaction between the students and the students with the professor, right? So there's small little tweaks that you can make. But at the same time, you can't be too rigid in setting up your culture that you're not allowing it to be shaped by the people that you're with and the people that come in the room. Because going back to that earlier slide, the people influence the culture as well. You can help set up the framework. And when we talk about things like values and beliefs, there are non-negotiables, absolutely, right? But you have to also be able to kind of mold and change a little bit with the different people that are coming in. So both. You got to be able to do both. All right, how are we feeling with all that? Yeah, I know what you're all going to do. You're all going to go home. You're going to be doing much deeper, hopefully, culture analyses on your teams when you get home. And that's a good thing, right? That can be a really, really fun experiment. All right, so here's what I want to leave you with. here are 5 C's for hopefully helping you to curate a healthy culture on your teams, in your congregations, your workplaces, organizations, what have you. 5 C's for curating culture. Say that 5 times fast, right? Love a good alliteration here. All right, so first things first, what can you create and or change? Right? For some of you, you might be starting from the ground up. Maybe this is something kind of brand new, and that's a scary place to be, but that's also an exciting place to be able to start something brand new. Or maybe you're taking over a new team and it's got kind of some well-established procedures and roles. What might you need to tweak to better fit you and the culture that you're trying to kind of shape? Right? So what can you create and change? I give you a couple examples, right? Sometimes they're little tweaks, right? Sometimes they're bigger ones, and I get that. And sometimes it takes investment, it takes budget, it takes personnel, right? But try to maybe come up with a list. I love lists. Then when you get your list, I love color coding too. So then you can kind of go through your priorities. What are some things that I can do, today, this week, this month, this year, and kind of go from there, right? What can you create or change? Then you got to communicate that. One thing I left off of the first one, sorry, create or change, and I shouldn't because it's plastered up here on the walls, but my question for many of you are going to be, how many of you have a clear mission and vision? I'm sure your churches do. Do your worship teams also? Do they have their own unique kind of mission and vision? Is that appropriate for your group? Maybe it is. Right? I love this. It's very clear. Everyone that comes in and worships here has a very clear understanding of the mission and vision. So do you have one? Do those on your team know what it is? Is it visual so people can see it? Do you practice it? Right? Do you say it, or is it just something that's, well, it's kind of on a wall, but it's tucked in the office, so really only if you're one of 4 people, you're probably the only ones that see it, right? So maybe you need to start there, kind of creating that. And what a great activity that can be to help bond a group together, to have others that are a part of that, right? And if you don't want to go with such official words as mission vision, just say, let's have some goals. What are our goals for worship for the next 6 months, right? What are some goals? I talked about maybe rehearsal locations, environments, again, dress code, right? That can be a big one. Structure or lack thereof. Again, going back to the first one, what a great opportunity to get creative. All right, so once you do that, then you have to be able to communicate it. Why are you doing this? Right? And get buy-in from the others. Right? This doesn't have to all fall on you. This is just part of the creative process. Why are you doing this? And then choose the appropriate method to communicate with your team. It's pretty awesome that we live in the digital age, but it's also incredibly exhausting. Right? There are so many options for how to communicate with people. Don't use them all. Don't try to use them all, right? You'll drive yourself crazy. But kind of going back to who's on your team, are you communicating in the most appropriate methods and with the most appropriate tools for those that you're working with? Okay. I was mentioning some people the other day that at the Townsend Institute, we're almost fully a remote team. So we've got a staff, including all of our faculty, that's there's probably about 20 to 25 of us, and only about a handful of staff and faculty work on the main campus in Irvine. So the rest of us are all across the country. So obviously emails, Zoom meetings, yes. We have text message chains. One of the biggest ways that I communicate with my closest colleagues actually is Marco Polo. The Marco Polo app, right? So this morning as I'm in my hotel room, getting ready for this morning, putting some finishing touches on a presentation, I'm Marco Poloing with my colleagues and they're wishing me good luck. That works for us. I can tell you that my Marco Poloing with Donna and Michelle, my 2 colleagues, probably saves me at least a dozen emails a week just by Marco Polo, right? It's not going to work for every team. I get that, but it's something that happens to work for us. So what is it that works for your team? Right? The WhatsApp, you name it. There's so many things that are out there. So kind of go back to your communication tools and find out what works best. Right? The third C. what can you do to coach those around you? So you're creating or changing, again, kind of that framework for your culture. You're communicating why or how you're going to do that. And think of yourself not just as, a leader or what that might look like, but as a coach. So you're teaching. Some of the best coaches I ever had growing up playing soccer or softball, I had a whole bunch of trust in. And I'll be honest, when I think back of all the conversations I had with coaches over the years, very few can I remember conversations being about the actual sport. But the most influential coaches in my life were the ones that were like, how's school going? Right? What's going on with your parents? How's family? Right? Have you started thinking about college? What are you going to do? Those types of conversations. And it's not just because I was a kid, right? Some of those same conversations I still have with some old coaches I had growing up who now as an adult, they're talking to me about my growing family and my career, right? That's an awesome relationship to have. And I'm sure many of you in this room, right? Sure, you might talk about, music or worship or creativity, but at the same time, the people on your team, their life, their personal life, their struggles, right? Their challenges, the hiccups, the things they're going through. Those are really, really important conversations to keep having that absolutely 100% impact the culture. So building that trust. Again, in the Townsend Institute, we talk a lot not just about professional growth, but personal growth at the same time. And what a ripe environment y'all are in to help with both of those, especially when you consider maybe some of the younger generation that are coming in that need a lot of both. They don't just need the professional growth, but they need those personal growth, right? Those guides. All right, the fourth one, this will ring true to those of you that sat in on my session yesterday, is conflict. Now, let me be clear. I'm not telling you to leave this room and go and create as much conflict as you can back on your teams. No. But I would say embrace it. Yesterday, we talked about managing conflict. Similar to Sheen's quote, if you don't manage conflict, it will manage you. It doesn't usually just go away. Right? Again, it will fester, it will get bigger, it will grow, and it will turn into something that sometimes is so unruly that you just can't get a hold of it. Okay. Conflict is not a bad thing. It really is not. There is so much growth that comes from conflict. It's how we manage conflict that is either healthy or unhealthy, right? Good or bad. So embrace those opportunities for conflict. Even when you think about like interpersonal conflict, it's funny, chances are you can remember maybe beginning stages of a relationship, maybe that first conflict or fight that you had with a significant other, right? Maybe they ended up becoming your spouse, right? And while it was very difficult, and it was maybe a little bit scary, and you're kind of seeing the side of the other person that you hadn't seen before, if you got through that conflict on the other side, chances are there was a lot of growth in that relationship. And there was oh, we got through that, right? I'm proud of us. And, and then those conflicts maybe they get bigger and deeper over time, but if you can get through that, the same can be said for when we talk about a team or an organizational conflict. Right? If you can get through that, it really can bond the team even tighter. Right? So manage that conflict, right? Address it, be able to hold the tension between the different pieces, and through it comes change. Right? If we didn't have conflict, we would have no need for change. It just becomes stagnant. All right, business as usual. Let's just do it the way we're going to do it, kind of thing. But that's not fun, right? Gotta mix it up a little bit. That's where the fun part comes. All right, and finally, the 5C, if you're not already doing it, celebrate. Celebrate yourselves, your team members, individually, and as a team. The celebrate piece. Individual wins, group wins. I've shared that I have 2 daughters. My oldest is 6 and in first grade, and this week she is star student in first grade. That just basically means No. She didn't have to do anything for it. Her name got pulled out of a hat. Everybody's going to be star student. So no, doesn't mean anything. But she gets to share her All About Me poster. Y'all remember that, right? Her All About Me poster, and it gets to go up on the wall. So, it's a very big deal in the household, star student. And so I'm sitting there and, she's talking all about it. And then I got to go up and everybody clapped for me. And then I get to be line leader. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm a little bit jealous. I want to be star student. I'm going to go to my boss. How do I get to be star employee for the week? This sounds like a lot of fun, right? Those little things don't end when you're 6, right? I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't know. We need to have a little bit of this too. But celebrating those team wins, those individual wins, birthday acknowledgments, anniversary acknowledgments, children coming alongside people in happy times and also grieving times. As adults, we still enjoy that. It helps us feel appreciated. It helps us feel seen, right? And you might actually be the only person who's doing that for someone, right? There might be other things that they're fighting and they're not feeling celebrated, not feeling seen in other aspects of their life, and you can kind of be that person. We were sharing here a little bit culture. You mentioned New Belgium, and you just shared with me that employees after 1 year working there get a bike, right? That's pretty cool. And after 20 years, a 4-week paid vacation, you might not be able to do that for the people on your team and your staff, but you could bring a cupcake, right? You could try to find a way to, buy their coffee or, something like that. So it doesn't necessarily matter the size, the scope, the cost associated with it, right? How many of you still like getting like a greeting card in the mail, right? I enjoy that, right? It kind of mixes up all the bills and all the other things that come and all the, coupons that I end up throwing away. Every once in a while when I get like a handwritten thank you note, birthday card, it's very special. I enjoy that. So what are ways that you can celebrate the members on your team? And I love that the speaker yesterday, Matthew, talked a little bit too about, seeking out the different groups in the congregations and maybe celebrating 1 week it's the nurses and 1 week it's, other first responders, or it's the military, or it's this or that. That is awesome. That celebrate goes a very, very big way. All right. How are we feeling about those 5 C's? Those sound good? All right, so keep in mind with these, and depending on where your culture is now and where you want it to be, remember, you only have so much say in this. It is going to be shaped by the people that are involved as well. Some of these are very small tweaks that you can make starting today. Others are going to be ones that you have to plan. You have to forecast. You have to bring others in, and they might take weeks or months to do. But I'll tell you, it's worth it. All right, so do a deeper assessment. Do a deeper analysis. Maybe ask around a little bit. That was the whole point of that project that our students do, is they really try to get in there, right? They were like secret shoppers in these organizations, and they were interviewing people and finding out, why do you do what you do? What makes these cultures so unique, right? What is it? Is it a conversation that's had or what have you? And so there might be some tweaks you can make to yours. Because the goal is to make your organization be one that people want to study. They want to look at your church or your team and they want to wonder, wow, that looks like a cool place to be a part of. I want to be a part of that team. Right. And for those of you that were wondering, cliffhanger, Golden Hippo is a marketing company owned by their employees, and you can look it up more if you want. But in the end, Ricky found that Golden Hippo actually wasn't as cool of a place as he thought it was going to be. So there you go. There's the story. So there you go, everyone. There's a little bit on culture. Thanks so much this morning. Appreciate it.